As always, it is a pre-recorded version of our situation. It's spring break, and I'm going to be spring breaking, eating very delicious, delectable goodies in New Orleans for the next couple of days. So this is pre-recorded. So if you're watching this live, it's on demand. This is on demand hoodlums this week. On demand hoodlums.
We practice what we preach.
Oh, indeed. Oh, indeed. As always, Mike Lang here with the big homie Webbs, and we're going to be leading you today through kind of walking through. It's nice outside. Because it's nice outside, people should be outside taking pictures and stuff, and you probably take pictures and stuff, and you're probably going on spring break. A lot of people be on spring break, whether you leave your environment or you don't leave your environment. Here's a great activity for your students to do just while walking out their classrooms. Webbs was nice enough to go on a jog around, I believe it's Sunset Park. Webbs, is that true?
Sunset Park, yep.
And she's got some pictures and stuff, and we're going to play around with some ideas today. But as we always do, we're going to start with our letter for the editor. And Webbs, we have a hot take, because this has been something that is, I don't want to say plagued, but challenged classroom teachers the entire school year. As a not teacher anymore, as someone who works with clients on a regular basis, what do you do when the client isn't cooperative, complains about perhaps how processes are working, has suggestions perhaps on how operations could be made more efficient or whatever? How do you deal with clients like that? What kind of relationships do you build with clients in order to be able to navigate things like that? And what kind of techniques and strategies do you use in order to ensure that those clients pay you at the end of those transactions?
That is important. It definitely depends on the client. Like, it depends on, history, a lot of different things. But generally speaking, one of the preemptive things I try to do is set expectations and communicate clearly. So, like, let's say that a client has hired me to do some work, and I want to make sure that I'm communicating to them, like, if there are problems, because especially on bigger projects, there's almost always problems. It doesn't go completely flawlessly. And that's part of what makes, I think, the type of work that I do higher demand and somewhat challenging, is because you can't, like, there isn't always a clear path forward at the beginning. So you have to do kind of adaptations as you go. But one of the ways to like accommodate for that is communicating. So we start out by going through kind of two phases where we figure out like what we're building and how we plan to build it. And we give the client the best idea of like, hey, this is how we think we're going to build this thing. But we never commit 100%, because we can't say for sure. We may get in there and find out like, oh, actually this isn't going to work for these reasons, and we didn't realize these were constraints were a thing. But the whole way, even when it's bad news, like, we're always communicating to the client. We have transparent ways of sharing information, usually on like an agile, like a Kanban board or something. So they can see, hey, this is what we're working on. Here's what's in progress. Here's what's being quality checked. This is the work that's done. We have checkpoints along the way. So like, we have stand up where we communicate like what's happened day to day. We have showcases at the end of each sprint that showcase like, hey, this is kind of the larger picture of the work that we worked on over this sprint. But a lot of it is communication. That's kind of preemptive, preventing the problem type effort. Sometimes things go wrong and you kind of have to recover. And I think if a client communicates, hey, that's not what I wanted, then we take that to heart and say, okay, how can we get back on the path to what the client actually wanted? And then also, how can we put processes in place to give more avenues for the client to communicate their wants and needs, and also to be able to showcase to them in smaller increments, hey, this is what we're working on, this is the direction we're going. I think especially when we see there's a pattern of behavior, we try to take that to heart as feedback. A one-off thing may not be feedback that we take to heart, but definitely if it's happening over and over again from multiple people, or if someone's bringing up the same issue over and over again, we want to get to the bottom of why and like what the challenge or frustration is and where that's coming from, and adjust our processes or the direction that we're going so that we can like make the client happy, because the ultimately like the point is we want to make the client happy. Every once in a while, like I would say 1 to 5% of the time, it just isn't going to work. Like, and then you end the relationship and you say, okay, we did our project, this clearly isn't going to work, like our ways of working aren't working, so it's not going to work. But it's a tiny 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 percentage of the time. Most of the time, through communication and setting expectations and communicating, I said communicating twice, but you know what, it deserves to be said twice, that can resolve like most problems.
Interesting.
Listening too, definitely listening, like that's a huge one, is actually listening and taking it to heart, not just listening to wait to talk.
Interesting. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Like being super observant of all of the ways people communicate. Right. Body language, their words, the gossip. I heard from third party person X that you got beef or whatever. Let me listen if that comes through. Right. So, given that you have been a classroom teacher, is it possible to take some of the strategies and techniques that you employ as a not teacher and embed those consciously, into a classroom?
I would actually say that a lot of the things that a lot of the soft skills that I have used as a consultant, I got because I was a teacher. Like, so thinking specifically about, so if you're a teacher who's looking to leave education, that's one of your strong suits, is being able to communicate with people, assuming you can communicate with people. Because, like, I think about my last year of teaching, I had this one kid who was so disruptive,
Mm.
so disruptive. Let's call him Nick. I can't remember the kid's actual name, but I can see his face. Anyway, let's call him Nick.
And
And
his name couldn't be Nick, correct? I'm just
it was
joshing.
definitely not Nick.
I'm
No.
joshing with you. Go ahead.
Oh. But let's say Nick, so he was a kid who was very chatty. Like always, like got along with everybody in class, was like a little social bee, going from flower to flower, having little conversations. He loved to use a cell phone in class. Just like loved video games, and was on, like, he finished his assignments and was on grade level, and then would generally like be bored when he was done.
Mm.
And so, and because of all the disruption, I had a conversation with him. I was like, dude, here's the deal. I get that like you really enjoy, having all these conversations with your classmates and whatever. And I think there's totally a time and place for that. But they need to get their work done too, and they have things that they need to focus on, and it's really difficult for them to do that when you're always having these conversations with them. So like, what could we do here that would like be engaging and entertaining and something you're interested in? Like, if you could pick anything, what would you want to do? And like give them an opportunity to finish their work.
Mm.
So we talked about what kind of things he was interested in. He's interested in game design. So I was like, okay, you could totally, I could set something up for you. So you could do like wireframes, design your own game. And this kind of led into uh, him doing that as an extra assignment too. Like, we had been working on something, he wasn't interested in it, but he's like, I'll do it if I can design a video game around it. I was like, okay, it's fine. Like, as long as you meet the standards, like that's really what I'm looking for. And yeah, so we had just had a conversation about it. I got his feedback of like, I'm bored. That's why I go talk to my friends, because I'm done with my work and I'm bored. And he was willing to understand that, like, hey, they need time to finish their work too. And even though you're, you know, being nice, talking to them, whatever, it's disruptive to them so that they can't get their work done. So it was just about like a give and take, a conversation. And I mean, it depends on the kid too. Like he had like the self-awareness to know, like, I'm doing this because I'm bored. And sometimes that can be a bit more challenging, and it might require a little bit more like prodding or like questioning on the teacher's part to really get the kid to figure out what it is that they're looking for. But I think that's an important life skill too, is being able to reflect and figure out like, yeah, what is the root cause of how I'm feeling or how I'm behaving. So I think it's really like that's a teacher skill that I took into software development and consulting.
How many, just in your experience, how many teachers you think would problem solve that student the same way?
That's a good question. I think some of it depends on state of mind because I've definitely been the teacher that doesn't recognize that and just is frustrated. Because that same year I had another kid who I like didn't see that with right away. It took some other teacher to help me say, like, here, try these things and see how far that gets you. And it did make a big difference, but I fought it every step of the way because like my cousin, who is also a teacher, had a really good point. She said, we kind of expect that we're going to have a great relationship with every kid that we meet. And it's just a fact of life that, like, not all human beings get along. So, why would that be any different for kids? So, like, it's okay for your kids to have relationships and want to connect with other adults as long as your relationship with them stays relatively neutral and doesn't get toxic. I think it's fine. um but maybe it means they have that relationship with another teacher on your grade level, and so when they're done with their work they get to go hang out with that teacher or do a project for that teacher or whatever. But this goes back to something we've been talking about for a long time, which is as teachers we isolate. Like, that's our default instead of working together in like a Power Ranger sort of way, Thundercat sort of way, like to use the best of each person's abilities to reduce the workload on each person individually.
The Power Rangers, that's very interesting because I was reading like the true life, like I think it was either Ranked or Cracked or one of them, kind of like why the Power Rangers, the initial team broke down. It's very interesting.
Hmm.
Um, so I challenge go Google that. I'm not going to tell you one of the reasons, but it was because they weren't a good team actually behind off camera and whatnot. Very very interesting. Um, the
Interesting.
super go just make use of the Googles and find out. There's a reason why the Blue Ranger changed. There's a reason why the Blue Ranger changed.
Hmm.
Um, but absolutely right. The siloing of ourselves, etc. The other thing is again that expectation that you're going to be everybody's friend. That's not how life works. We have a functional relationship inside of school as well as in terms of there is a transactional component to education. Is work to be done. There are standards to be mastered in quotation marks, etc., etc. And it should not be all that should not be predicated on me liking every student in the classroom. That I'm gonna because I've had experiences as a student in classes in which I've seen services withheld from students because I don't like you, or you make my life difficult, or I perceive XYZ happens, or I'm gonna send you to the blue bench outside the office because of whatever's going on with you, right? Um, so that's super. It's very very interesting that the transfer skills was the opposite way. It was the teacher skills to the software dev a platform. One of the things I've always thought was interesting because I'm an introverted person naturally is observe. Right, I don't say anything to very many people when I first meet them. I just observe you in your natural habitat because you don't know. Generally, people don't know that you're watching them. Right, I want to see who you hang with, who you don't talk to, what part of the room you go to, what you eat, what you don't eat, what you got of shoes you wearing. Did you wear the same shoes 3 days in a row? Did you sit with that same person 3 days in a row? What? Because then you can start looking at patterns of this person has an affinity for this group of individuals and perhaps does the same thing this other person does, whatever. And it gives you a ability to invent conversation, right? So I can go if I'm sitting and observe. I'll tell you this, all right. Before you and I were business partners, I remember very distinctly we had a Microsoft in service as DLCs, and we had it at a hotel that had a pool. And so I sat and just observed everybody, what they were doing, who they were with, who they weren't with, who they were talking to, who they weren't talking to. And I observed you, not in the kind of the creepy, like, serial killer way, but you sat down at the pool and you took out a comic book and you started reading it. And I said, okay, this is a person who's a little different than these other individuals. This is interesting. If I were to have a divergent view of how education would work or whatever, the fact this person reads comic books might lend me to believe that perhaps this person has a similar view, and not one that's going to be vanilla, right? And it's you colored your hair, you wore Chuck Taylors. It's like you can observe people and then start to and mentally map out, okay, these might be this person's affinity groups. And I think that's also something that teachers don't do a lot of time with because of the power dynamics inside of classrooms. Instead of sitting at your table and drinking your coffee and just watching and inviting a little bit of chaos. What does that person do when I don't say anything to him? That kid ran around the classroom throwing water everywhere. Okay, that's very interesting. What did this girl over in the corner do when I didn't say anything to her? She sat and did all her work, or she went and talked to this friend of hers, and they didn't do their work, but they didn't cause any problem for anybody else. They sat and whispered and they had fun or whatever. I think a lot of times if you allow a state of nature to exist at the beginning of your class and don't stomp that out, people reveal all kinds of things to you that even they may not know themselves, rather than just Harry Wonging it day one. You know what I'm saying? And everybody's killing the personality and whatnot.
I think too some of that comes from we have this innate feeling, and at least I always did, and I still kind of do, where you always have to be doing something. Like if you're not doing something, then there's a little voice in your head that says you're being lazy. You're not doing anything. You're not making they're paying you to do nothing. How dare you just sit here and collect money and waste time, and there's this like voice of guilt if you just sit and watch things happen. When I agree with you, I think there is a power in observation. There is a power in like just watching your students in their native environment to see what they do and who they talk to and what their interests are, what their tendencies are. Like I have always been the type of person that prefers to sit by myself. Like I like to sit by myself. I like to read my book. I don't care to make small talk with people. It's nothing against other people. It's just anxiety inducing. I would much rather just sit quietly with my book in the corner and wait for whatever is supposed to happen next. So, yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think you can learn a lot from just quietly observing.
Absolutely. So I think that getting those and I think that's a soft skill as well. That's a soft skill that uh, we don't utilize as a soft skill, unfortunately. But I think a lot of conflict could be avoided by just being a scientist and saying, I'm not going to interfere with the experiment. I'm just going to observe this. If I don't make any interruptions to how this plays out, this is what happens. Interesting, because I think both you find both instances as frequently. You'll find a situation in which you're like, oh my goodness, this is a student that perhaps I'm going to need to have some proximity to when we do less scaffolded activities. Or you know what, these kids really know, they really trust one another, and they trust me that when I ask them to do certain things, they do what they need to do. And I think that's a skill that I just unfortunately or fortunately innately have that ability, because I think like yourself, I'm an extremely introverted person. I have come out of that as I've become older in terms of being able to function with people. But I spent the entire time in San Diego just about with my headphones on, walking that Balboa Park by myself, and it was fun. I was able to do everything I wanted. If I had a question, I could answer the docents and converse with them to get the information I needed and do what I needed to do. There are people on the opposite spectrum that have to have that vampiric I stick energy from other people type situation, which is totally cool as well. I am married to one of those people, right? It bugged the devil out of her that we were inside during the pandemic. And like I was totally fine with not seeing other people other than her, and she was like cabin fever and I gotta go out and this and that. Got it. I understand it. That leads me to, before we get in deep into our kind of activity here, like I asked that question of you because more frequently on social media, it has become this: the cell phones are the devil, and now the earbuds are the devil. Having the earbuds in their ears is just like the worst thing of all time. And
They would not be happy to go around an office full of software developers.
I don't know where doesn't that happen? I mean, not just software
Even
developers,
Yeah,
anywhere.
so even even when when I worked here in an office, so after I left ThoughtWorks, I worked for a company here. I had an actual office that I went to, and there were probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 of us in the office in this little like WeWork space or whatever. And pretty much everybody had headphones, AirPods, earpods, earbuds, whatever. Like everybody had something to plug in their ears because especially in an open office layout, like that's the only sort of privacy you're going to get. And what is a classroom but an open office layout?
But also, to the question I asked earlier, no one is asking, why are these people doing this, right? No one's asking the question. The most salient question is, I'm observing this person and I see 85% of my class with earbuds in their ears and not paying attention.
Because it's the assumption of defiance. I think a lot of teachers default to an assumption of defiance rather than understanding or asking and having a curious perspective.
Because you can, right? School is one of the few places in which you can blame the client, the user, for all of the things and not have any economic repercussions, any employment repercussions. Imagine you go to a restaurant, right? And no one eats their food. Could the restaurateur say, there is something wrong with those people? No. Automatically, we know something is wrong with the food, and I'm going to go on Yelp and I'm going to say, oh my God, this is the worst sandwich I've had in my life. Do not eat at, at Michael's sandwich shop on 15th Street because it is the worst. I saw a roach and a fly and stuff, whatever. Those things would happen, right? There would be either the restaurant would clean up its act and and try to do something to encourage people to come back to the restaurant, or it would shutter. But there would be no, it is your fault, client person, customer person. And that is kind of the most interesting thing with all of the social media posts I've seen around the subject. It has been this, yes, and my kids are doing that too. But why?
And also, it's super interesting to me because the solution is often banning them. Like, ban them from being able to use their phones, ban them from being able to have AirPods in. A bunch of people like proudly displayed signs that are at their door that say no your earbuds or headphones allowed. But like, I was just having this conversation with my roommate. There is always this arms race, right? There is, whether it's cybersecurity or whatever, it's always we prevent you from doing a thing, we find a way around it. We prevent you away from doing that new thing, we find a way around it. Like, so it's the number one lesson we learn, right? Is don't engage in a power struggle, and that's exactly what this is. You're engaging in a power struggle. The whole, we were talking a couple episodes back about the Yonder pouches that they're having kids put their phones in. Like, all it takes is a $20 magnet from Amazon and I can bust open that pouch without breaking it and use my phone all day and then just put it back in there and pretend like I never did. Like,
But
there's
you all,
always like, it's a power struggle. Like, why are you letting yourself get into this power struggle instead of coming at it with curiosity and being like, why are you opting to wear your headphones or use your phone? What is it about my content that is not engaging to you? And what would make it more engaging to you?
but you could even, so even if you were the least imaginative person, right? And you were like, all right, what I want to be able to do is do my version of whatever my best job is. And if that's standing in front of students and lecturing at them for whatever minutes, okay, that I don't think that's particularly engaging or successful. But if that's your style, God bless you. All you would have to do, like most bosses, is say, all right, cool, let's have a compromise here, Webbs. You know what? I want you to listen to my boring rants for 20 minutes. After that, I'm going to give you a 10-minute break in which you can take your phone up, put your headphones in, or whatever. And then after that, we'll do our group activity or whatever, and then it'll be time to roll. Now, you ain't got to call it Pomodoro. You ain't got to call whatever. I'm making concessions to the individuals because I want you on one side when it pops off. To me, it doesn't make, what's 10 funky minutes? When in the grand scheme of things, you now have an army of minions who will do what you want just for giving them 10 minutes to go on Instagram or whatever.
Because you have to be willing to compromise in the first place. And I think that's part of the problem is the mentality for a lot of folks is, why should I have to give up any of my time? They should be, they automatically default to respecting my authority and following my directions and doing as I say. And I feel incredibly slighted that they're not doing exactly as I say, and I get 100% of their time.
I get paid
But
the
like, that's not how
same.
humans are.
You get paid the same amount of money whether they do the work or they don't do it. Whether you talk for 50 minutes or you talk for 12 minutes. So I figured out mid-career when I was about year 5 or 6, when I came back from Taiwan and I started to like really deep dive into why am I doing this job and who should be doing the job. My job is not to talk at you. My talk is to get you to reimagine what the standard state in order to build product. And that requires me to do less talking because one, I like coffee and I like my coffee hot. And two, I already passed the 4th grade, the 5th grade, the 6th grade, the 7th grade, whatever grade you're teaching. I don't need to do the work.
One of my favorite classes that I've had so far in my PhD program, I'm taking this semester, and it's qualitative methods. And we do not meet every week. We meet periodically at strategic points because the other days that we're not meeting, we're supposed to be working because we're actually doing research. And that's the point of the class. So it's just so much more meaningful to, one, be given that time instead of also taking up that time and then stacking more work on top of that time. But also, like, I feel like my time is valued because of that. And I like the class so much more because of that.
We got back from my W-2 job, and I'm now adopted that into my lexicon webs. My W-2 job, we went to San Diego, had a great time, not only investigating and exploring Balboa Park, but we went to Design 39 campus up in Poway. And if you have an opportunity to go see that school, it is well worth getting an opportunity. Shout out to Judy, shout out to Billy Corcoran. Also, shout out to Amy Richardson. She and I worked together at Kirk L. Adams Elementary School in Las Vegas. She's the AP at Design Campus 39, or Design 39 campus. It was a very, very welcome surprise to see her there when she was our tour guide for the entire morning. So that was really cool. However, one of the interesting things, Webbs, was, when you go there, you're not going to see, is there diversity there? Yeah. Is it diversity like an inner city school would be? Of course not. It's not that situation. San Diego, I fell in love with the place, but then I looked at how much real estate costs, and I was like, yeah, I would have to like hit the lottery like 17 times on the road in order to live in San Diego. But the interesting thing about their situation was it was an assumption of competence, and I've used that term for decades. We assume other drivers are competent on the roads. We assume that your airline pilot is. You have to assume. There's no way you would get on the road if you weren't assuming that there was not a good chance you would return back home in one piece, right? So you assume when you go to a restaurant that chef is someone who knows what they're cooking and is healthy and is not gonna like do things to your food that's not supposed to have. All these places we assume competence, except in schools, lots of times, right? We assume this person is just someone who has to be in 2nd grade because they're a complete buffoon. They showed up tabula rasa. They have no prior experiences. They don't know how to do squat. The language of the school was so intentional that it made you kind of like aspire to ensure that the words that you utilize when you're talking to students was even more empathic, right? That you're using even more clarifying questions, and you were attempting to understand them rather than the other way around, right?
Do you have an example of that?
For example, we went to a 3rd grade classroom, and we had some students that were talking. They were asked to explain to us their essential question, and Judy, who is one of the instructional leaders, they don't use the term feedback. They use the term feed forward. And so I was like, that's pretty interesting, right? We don't want to go
I've
backwards.
heard that somewhere else before, yeah.
We don't want to go back. We want you to take what we're saying and move forward, whether we move forward with what I said or move forward because I said, now that's not something I want to choose. It's a lot. And when you start to unpack that, it gives you a better visual of what the expected outcome is than feedback. Let's go and talk, and then you're gonna go back to the way you were doing it before, and maybe contemplate some stuff rather than let's take this journey together. My criticism of you, or my the conversation is meant to propel you, not to hold you backwards. I think that's pretty dope. I mean, I used to have a lot of the elders in my neighborhood as a kid. I never said you don't want to be understood, you want to be overstood. And I really took that to heart when I was a kid. We don't want to understand things; we want to overstand things. It was like, oh, okay, cool. You really want to get a very panoramic view of the things that you're being asked to do. And so that was very cool. But it's also, I walked through all these kids with hats on, and no one said anything about them at all. And kids just walking through the hallways with hats and whatever dress clothes they were. It was this place where it was like it was my space. They were working. Design thinking was at the heart of everything that they did, and product based stuff, etc. So it was very, very impressive. And then I juxtaposed that with there were no signs that said no headphones allowed. There were no signs that said you can't take your cell phone out. None of those things. If I'm sufficiently, and this is not a shot at any teachers or anything, but if you're sufficiently engaged, you're not thinking about distractions. Because when I watch a Marvel movie, I'm not taking my cell phone off and looking at Instagram when Spider-Man No Way Home is. This is something that's gripping my attention. Oh my God, or whatever. And I might use my cell phone to say, hey, did you just watch this movie, New XYZ? But I'm not going to distract myself from any moments of what is currently engaging my attention. And it always, in 2022, this fight against the technology webs and not exploiting the technology to make it do what we want it to do, but instead of, bemoaning its existence as if a previous time when they didn't exist was a better time. It's just mind numbing.
I was happy to see that in a lot of those conversations, there are teachers out there who are saying exactly that. Like, we should be embracing the technology that's there and giving them purposeful reasons to use their phones, or, have quiet work time where they can listen to their music or whatever. Like, embrace that and use it to your advantage. Don't, instead of just complaining and trying to engage in a power struggle against it.
Kids like to listen to music while they do their work. I like to listen to music while I
Adults
do
like
work.
to listen to music.
Yeah.
I like mandatory have to have. I have a specific channel I listen to on Apple Music when I'm doing work, because it signals to my brain, hey, it's time for you to do work. All the music on that channel has no lyrics, because I found that if songs have lyrics when I'm trying to study, I focus more on the lyrics than on the work that I'm supposed to do. So not only is it a cue to my brain, like, hey, when we're listening to this playlist, it's time for us to focus on work, but also it's a specific type of music that helps me to engage best, because I find if I don't have some sort of cue to help me focus, then I'm all over the place. I'm like, oh, but I should do this thing, and I should do this thing, and I could do this thing, and I'm distracted by that thing. Like, it allows me to do deep work when I have that playlist on.
Dope. I found the opposite. So this is very interesting. I listen to the same song on repeat in perpetuity until I'm finished with something. So it's just the same song over and over. So it becomes this like white noise because it's just a song just blah, 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 blah. But what I have found is that a lyric will hit my head at the right time, and it's like, oh, shorty, that's exactly what I needed to do. Thank you, 50 cents. Let's go do what we need to do, right? So yeah, that's super dope. I had some issues with United Airlines today, which reminded me of all of the things. But I don't think United is a great airline, but their people. I had two of the greatest individuals who helped me out for almost 2 hours today to get some things done. Shout out to those people that I will not name, but it did show me that Southwest is perhaps a little bit better in terms of I don't have to book a seat. I just like book the flight and then walk on the plane and walk out. The whole booking of seats is a very interesting and lucrative business as well, because all the economy plus, and you're like, all right, dude, all right, you pulling my chain here. But anyway, outside. So again, I had the good fortune of being in San Diego all weekend and until Wednesday, and you can't beat their weather. I don't care what. I've never been a place where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like heaven on earth. I can just walk around and just do things. But it really got me my mind racing in terms of what are places, even if we're going to deal with just neighborhoods, right? Just being outside, I think, frees our creative juices to go and start exploring possibilities. And so Webbs did go out to Sunset Park, which one of our nice natural places. Unfortunately, is far away from things, especially if you're on the west side or Summerlin and things. But it's a very, very nice place to go. The Springs Preserve, the wetlands, Red Rock, just walking around your neighborhood, your dog or your cat or whatever animal, your Komodo dragon, walking them around your neighborhood, I think is interesting. Taking pictures of people is interesting. People who would allow you to take their picture is super interesting as well in terms of just portraiture and things like that are dope. I got into a very interesting conversation with somebody who intimated to me that the cell phones have made people vain because people take selfies. And I was like, have you ever been to an art gallery before? Like people had their portraits taken from the beginning of time, fam. People are interested in how they look and propelling that image into the world. So I think that's another thing, Webbs, in terms of like that whole before at this other undisclosed time, things were better. And no, we didn't used to do those things. Yeah, you always did those things, fam. We
The
just didn't do
complaint
it.
of people are always on their cell phones, especially when it's like, oh, look at this picture from, the subway of people on their cell phones and not talking to each other. Nobody talked to each other. If you look 100 years ago, people sat on the train and read a newspaper. They're basically doing the same thing now. It's a bunch of strangers. I'm not going to just randomly strike up a conversation with a stranger. Like,
Uh,
stop it. Just
and if
stop it.
somebody
Like,
randomly picked up a conversation with you, you would think something is wrong with that person in terms of what does this person want from me? Let me make sure this person doesn't follow me when I get off this train. I'm going to purposely go the wrong direction out of this train station to see if this person. There's a lot of things that will go through your mind in terms of some random person striking a conversation up with you, but it is
every
what it is.
incident where I had to get off of a train car while I lived in New York because some weird shit was going on. Oops, sorry.
This is
Um,
adult. It's an adult program.
um, yeah. They all just came flooding back to me. One time a guy threw his shoe at me. Yeah, it was fun.
Those things. I mean, that was one thing that was equally horrifying, as in Vegas as in San Diego, was the amount of homeless people who obviously were in need of mental health services as well. That we had somebody go straight crazy on a corner. He knocked the guy's glass bottle out of his hand and started to talk about things that weren't there and stuff like that. It was really sad. So we need universal health care, my friends, so we can make sure that people get the services they need. But that is a
Indeed.
conversation for another time. As we've been kind of deep diving again into Canvas, we wanted to really show you the finished portion of something rather than kind of building it as we went. And so um, I am a huge poetry fan. I've been writing poetry since I was like 7 years old. It was the most liberating thing I think I learned in school because I liked it because poems don't have rules. Like you can fit anything's a poem. Prose, I was getting my hand slapped all the time about capitalization and punctuation marks and stuff. But a poem, I could say this is a poem, that's a poem, anything's a poem. So I generally make sure that students are aware that you can express yourself and free yourself of the bonds of oppression of the English language. Sometimes there are some times that you're going to have to write incomplete sentences and stuff, of course, but you can Cummingsify your ability to um, converse with other people as well. So this is just a single module, and a single module has one discussion in it. Now, discussions are the dopest thing to do in my opinion because of the fact that there is a conversation that can be had. This is how I would do just regular instruction. And so in terms of getting information to the students, you see I have a little haiku deal that they be able to walk through. This is my example of the haiku. And what we're going to walk through today is we're going to build a assignment from two different perspectives. All right. So one as an artist, and Webbs has been, Webbs is a student in this class, so she's going to be contributing here as an artist, and then we're also going to be looking at things as a patron. because I think, Webs, you can, let me know your feelings on this. It is very important to role model students how to consume media, art, um, conversations with with other people tastefully. I don't think that's something that we do very often. Um, Going through the museums and things in San Diego, there were obvious examples of people who had never been taught patronage, who there were rules that were the particular at the San Diego Art Gallery of Art. We had to put our backpacks on backwards because of the fact that people had been rubbing up against artwork with their backpacks, which is also kind of as the first art gallery I've ever had to do that. So I had to flip it like I was a pregnant person. So that was interesting holding my backpack that way. But again, those I think it also goes to the fact that schools don't do field trips as often as they used to do. I will say that's something that is something that has changed. We used to go to field trips all the time when I was in elementary school, especially. Webs, did you have that experience?
We'd go probably like once a year. I think some of that has to do with like where I grew up versus where you grew up. Like any field trip we'd have to take would have to be by bus.
Uh,
Um, and it would probably be a bit of a drive too. So, probably about once a year we went on field trips.
well, and that what was something else. I was to your point. One of the things that was some reflection that I did coming back in one of the lists was how blessed I was to grow up where I was in terms of the independence of movement. Being able to hop on the train, go to Smithsonian, not have to have any money in your pocket whatsoever, learn on accident about all these things that happened previous to you, and then be able to get home. Um, yeah, that's something that a lot of communities don't have. That's something that the Las Vegas community doesn't have, unfortunately. So, um, connecting communities through trains and other forms of mass transit might be something else that would you're talking about equity, something that we would have to look forward in time to. But regardless, um, this assignment that I built is two pronged. So we may not get to all the haiku stuff, but we really want uh, to simulate what a conversation might look like on a discussion page. So the assignment here is as an artist to be able to utilize a picture that you took, and Webb's took 10 or 15 pictures, and then add a haiku to it. The haiku part we're not going to get to live here on demand or whatever. But the patron part to me, Webb's, is as important, and that is being able to question the artist about their work, their creative process, why they made certain decisions. Because one of the things I am super in favor of is asking students to produce a product, but not hamstringing them as to what they can do in order to do it. What say you on that, Webbs?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think it's default for, at least from what I learned in like teacher preparation school, that oh, you have a preset, project that they're going to have to do versus here's the guidelines I want you to meet and however you get there is up to you. Like I shifted to that in my later years as a teacher, but I think what I taught and what I came out of was just here's the project, here's the rubric, go do this project. And even there was some back and forth about do you provide an exemplar? Do you not provide an exemplar? I have to say, working with you, it's really brought me around to providing the exemplar. And even if they like copy it and just make some adjustments that are slightly different, it's not actually the worst thing in the world because that's kind of how we learn, right? Like when I go to make, for example, I just got a smoker. I'm going to be making bacon from scratch for the first time. I am not going to wing it. I'm going to follow a recipe exactly the way the recipe says and make sure that it comes out the way I expect. And then the next time I go to make it, maybe I'll make a couple tweaks. And eventually I may get to the point where I can do it without a recipe or I have my own personalized version of it. But I always start from I'm following the exact recipe that the chef gave me to know that I can do the process right.
Absolutely, because we know if the recipe exists so that you get a acceptable version of that dish. And we are very hung up on the concept of invention. Like that is something that people are very hung up on. And that is a rarity in society. In invention, I happened to go through the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and they were highlighting Galileo and his contributions to flight. And he doesn't call it invention; he calls it discovery. Right? These are things that already were here. I just found them. So the concept of invention really doesn't exist. Is you discovered something that was already there. It was just waiting for somebody to say, "Hey, okay, cool. Now this thing works." But we can go into a long philosophical diatribe about that. But you'll notice again in the last sentence of that first paragraph, you may use any artistic vision you would like in order to present your contribution, but please be prepared to defend your decisions if asked. So if a patron were to ask you, Webbs, why did you take that picture and make it turn it into a circle and then make it pulse every 15 seconds? There needs to be some way, that you defend this is the reason why I did my art this way. And as long as you can do that, and God bless you, you get an A like everybody else gets an A, and we keep it moving. And you could, to me, challenging the reason why I like the concept of supervillains, not in some kind of like Vladimir Putin way, but supervillains in comic books, they are not stopped by reality. Superheroes will say, "I'm here to make sure that the status quo remains the same, and everybody can go to work and eat their tuna sandwich." The supervillains is saying, "Nah, there's something wrong with this, and let's push on some boundaries here to see what happens." All right, and so kind of in a tongue-in-cheek way, you want to encourage your students to push the boundaries of things. I gave you the tuna fish sandwich version of this project. You see, it has just the basic stuff here. What kind of things do you have that would add the sriracha mayo to that tuna fish sandwich? Could you turn a TikTok into a haiku? Well, absolutely, positively, you could. There's nothing that says you could take a picture and then dance around, dance your way out, and do the little ones. I love the ones where they point their finger and the words pop up, and then why couldn't you do line 1, line 2, line 3, and then it
Do,
pops it?
do, do, do.
You know, I love those. Like, but you have to be willing to push people off the ledge for kids to even consider that those things are possibilities. The other thing, the reason why the discussion page is dynamite is that patronage situation, that conversation between artist and the person that is consuming or observing the art, and allowing every artist to also be a patron. All right. The other idea, and shout out to Janine Collins, who was my W2 work partner, um, ensuring that kids understand clarifying questions are important. Excuse me, and role modeling what clarifying questions are. And just throwing that link in there. And this is from Indeed. They do a pretty good job of the just explaining them, but they take it from a workplace and interviewing kind of perspective. But clarifying questions are questions that the listener asks the speaker, so the patron would ask the artist in this place, in an attempt to eliminate or prevent any misunderstanding, confusion, or ambiguity. What kind of questions can I ask? Not to say your art sucks and I don't understand it, but I'm seeking to understand what you're trying to tell me rather than saying that I don't like this particular thing or I'm confused and therefore I walk away. Forcing both the listener and or in this case both the artist and patron to have a conversation in which we are seeking to understand one another rather than I don't get it, this sucks, and I walk away. Clarifying questions, friends. This is another thing in terms of like classrooms with the headphones and the cell phones, asking clarifying questions to Judy. Why are you on your headphones right now? I'm not asking this to be mean. I don't. Why are you on your head? Oh, I'm listening to a podcast. It's actually talking exactly about what you're talking about. I was trying to find. Oh, suddenly we have a situation where Judy's actually doing something rational because Webbs, I don't know if you're like myself. When I'm watching a TV show, I've got my phone in my hand because I'm Googling the actor. I know I've seen this person, something else. Is this a true story? Is this inspired by some other thing or whatever? Is that weird or is that something that you do as well?
No, I do that too. I think too, one of the points that was made in the conversation on social media was some kids may be using aids to help them better understand like what you're saying, whether that's translation, audio translation, whether it's amplification of the audio, maybe they're recording it. There could be a lot of reasons. And granted, even if the reason is I'm just listening to music because you're boring, that still gives you information to like adjust how you're doing things. It can, if you're genuinely curious, if you come at it with a curious perspective, um then it can open a relationship instead of shutting it down.
Big facts. I agree. All right, cool. So this is from a teacher's perspective, all right? And I'm not going to hit student view because we're going to switch to Webbs's screen. And don't worry about the haiku unless you just make one off the top of your head. We've got a haiku um, the canvas thing already created, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
with all that stuff. So you could go to our store and you can download that. All the things are already there. All the things are there. We just want to kind of role model to you how this works. And I'm going to actually reply. When she is the artist initially, I'm going to reply to her. You're going to see what the, before we do that, Webbs, the back end here. So this is one of the things that, again, teachers aren't exploiting. You can grade this. You can grade the discussion. All right. So if you don't have to limit yourself to assignments because again, assignments are one way. I will not get clarifying questions in writing or anyway outside of if the kid was there when I gave the assignment and they heard all the words that I said because they speak fluent English and I didn't speak in an excited tone. This way, if there are clarifying questions that need to be had, everyone can see said clarifying question because it's based in a discussion. If a kid needs to copy and paste something from Google Translate or they need to record their voice actually saying what they're saying, I have all that information here and I can help people a lot more efficiently and effectively. Go ahead, Webs.
So I thought about this earlier in the week because on in my statistics class, the way that it's set up for us to submit like these workshops we have to do, they're set up as quizzes where we submit a document and there is no place to like comment or ask questions. And I thought I had discovered a bug because discovered a bug before in an assignment. And I wanted to ask, like, hey, I'm getting this result for question number 5. And no matter how many times I go through this, like it's telling me, because basically it'll give you like feedback. You enter your answer and it gives you a green check mark if it's correct and a red X if it's wrong. And I did all my calculations. I'm still getting the correct result, but like I'm it's telling me that this particular number is wrong. And I thought that they made a mistake. Like they forgot to subtract one. It's a whole complicated thing with T tables, but that's not important. Anyways, but there was no place for me to just comment to the professor and say, hey, I think I found a problem. Am I doing this right? Is this correct? Like, can we have a conversation about it? So I just didn't. I was like, whatever, I'll just get that one wrong, I guess, then, because there's the alternative is I had to email him and you have to give him 24 hours and then he only gets back. And then when he does get back to you, like it all has to be outside of the assignment. So trying to explain what I was talking about in the assignment was like a whole extra thing. And so I was like, that's too much work. I'm just not going to do it.
And also, you have now deprived yourself of being perhaps someone else either had that exact same scenario and solved it some way, and okay, you as the instructor have now siloed yourself as the only person that knows the things, rather than saying there are 25 other people in this classroom who might have some area of expertise that, unbeknownst to you, that might be able to contribute to solving Webb's question. But you want to always allow the threaded replies because when you do things like this, you want students to be able to reply on the actual piece of artwork or the question or whatever that's necessary. I generally say users must post before seeing replies. I want you to be able to put your artwork up and then you're free to go and do everything else. You can enable the podcast feed if you would like. Graded, and your grades do not need to be letter grades. This is how I did my attendance every day when I was at Keller Middle School. I had a discussion question of the day. It was complete and incomplete. I knew if you contributed, you were there without question. Especially with masks on, I couldn't disseminate who was who. This was a great way for me to say your bell worker's there. Go ahead and do your little small art product or type your sentence or whatever. Boom, I've got the discussion. So at the end of the day, as I am wont to do, I forgot to go and do the attendance for period 2 or whatever. I just went back to period 2's discussion. All right, they were there. Cool. Bob wasn't there. There's a potential Bob wasn't there. Oh, I do remember him because he has the pink butterflies on his thing or whatever. All right, cool. And we can go what we need to do. All right. You can also do group discussions inside here. Make it an assignment the way that you were doing it and require peer review. So if there's a situation in which I wanted, say, Webbs is going to create in her own art installation of 25 pieces of photographs and haiku, and I want peers to look at her thing and give me some feedback or give her some feedback on it, I could go and I could say, give the peer reviews. I can manually assign them or I can automatically assign those things so that she has two people who look at her thing and give her some feedback for it. All right, cool. I'm not going to do any of that other stuff. So now, this is the from the teacher's perspective. Let's look at what this looks like from the Webb's perspective.
So this is the photo walk installation, right?
Yeah.
So if I click on it, I should see very similar.
And so what I want you to do first, Webbs, is go under, hit the reply button, ask me any question any question that you have.
I haven't read the assignment yet, so
I'm sorry for putting pressure on you, Webbs. Excuse me.
Using knowledge is it.
All right. So you'll see that, first of all, that's a question that if, say, Webbs was not in the classroom, say she was working asynchronously, I see Webbs' name there. I know what pronouns to refer to her by as well. What if she can't take pictures? Excellent.
Ooh, I'm subscribed too.
All right, refresh your page. This is the only, you're going to have to refresh your page to see things pop up.
Are you telling me that you can't take pictures of yourself or that you don't have a way to take pictures?
All right, refresh your page. You should be subscribed to it. Anyway.
That's interesting because it looks like yours automatically came up. I wonder why mine requires a refresh. No worries.
I had to refresh my page on.
Oh, you did? Okay, I just missed it. Our goal here is to take images of your environment, but you don't have to be in any of the pictures if you don't want to. Okay, cool.
All right, so let's walk them through the uploading of a picture, Webbs, if possible. And if you don't want to share the actual pictures, Unsplash is an actual option here as well. So if you've got students who couldn't take pictures because they don't have a device, they could utilize Unsplash because it's built into the platform to take an image of marigolds or the red rock or whatever in order to do what they needed to do as well.
Should I actually create a thing, or are we just generally uploading an image?
This for we're getting pretty close to time, so for right now, don't worry about creating the haiku.
Okay.
So if you notice here, she can upload from her computer, from Unsplash, or add a URL as well. And as you're doing that, Webbs, could you explain what alt text at the bottom is, what that is, and why that's important?
Yeah, so alt text actually, it's used by screen readers to describe the content of an image. So this in and of itself would be a writing task because describing, especially like an image as complex as this one, is going to take a little bit. The idea being that if I have a screen reader, because I have visual impairments and I need the screen reader to read to me, it will tell me what the image is. So like, hold on, I'm gonna mute because my keyboard is loud. So I've given it a pretty solid description so that if my screen reader were to come across this image, it would be able to tell you about what's in the image.
And it says
So
decorative image
yeah.
there. When would we use? When would we use that?
So decorative image would be like if the image isn't purposeful, if it's just there to be pretty, then you don't need to read it. So this kind of relates to people sharing their Wordle scores on Twitter. So screen readers that come across the way the Wordle scores are shared, they're little emojis. So if a screen reader comes across a tweet that has all those little Wordle scores and doesn't, instead of it being like an image with alt text, it'll read it as box green, box green, box yellow, box black, and it'll do that for all like 30 boxes, which isn't helpful in any way. It doesn't convey actual meaning. So when you have maybe you've added some decorative images on your page just to make it look cool, then you can tag it as decorative image and a screen reader will skip it.
Cool.
So I have my image, I have my alt text. I'm gonna hit submit.
All right. So we can pretend that she's written her haiku and whatnot, etc., etc. You can go and you see her alt text there. You can change the dimensions if you would like. So if you make the dimensions smaller or whatever, you can do that. All right. And this is the beauty of threaded replies. So when she hits that reply button.
So it starts a new one outside of the previous conversation. I love this picture. I don't know why, but I this is my favorite out of all the ones I took.
Yeah, it's a very, very dope picture. But also our previous conversation doesn't go anywhere. It's still there and available for anybody to see it. We don't know if there's anybody else that for religious reasons or just because they have personal preference does not want to be a photograph. I'm not a particularly happy person when I get photographed, especially without my permission. And so that is definitely something that's going to be available to her. I'm going to sit and I'm going to go and say.
By the way, also while Mike is typing that, these two buttons at the top, I can collapse all of my threads. So if I want to collapse the what if I can't take pictures thread, then I don't have to see all of that and I can just focus on, oh, okay, I want this one right here. I'm going to open it. So that way it's not like, oh my gosh, I have to scroll so far.
All right. And so I'm going to go and add something here. All right. Go and refresh your page.
Where did you take it? How does it make you feel?
And so you'll notice this can be against you. Web's demonstrated to you how you could collapse the threads that perhaps you weren't interested in or whatever. But this can go on forever and ever, and we can have multiple conversations happening with a bunch of students if they're threaded, right? I can be all over the place, and people can do things. And one of the coolest things as a teacher that I did the last 2.5 months of my career was sit in my classroom after school and just read through people's discussions and discover what kind of music people were into, where people were from, what anime kids were watching, books that people liked, all kind of stuff. And again, what's the other cool thing about sharing is that I shared a GIF. Now Webs is going to Giphy to it inspires other people to kind of follow that same thing, right? So demonstrating to your students, yo, this is a way you can communicate with people, memes, gifs, whatever, and these kind of things beget curiosity and imagination and creativity. Go ahead, just
Also,
hit the reply button; it'll pop up.
okay. Another thing, oh cool. Another thing to think about is use of GIFs is a way to build effective association and community within your online class as well and in person. Because this shows personality, a little bit about yourself. Like I chose Encanto because I love that movie. Um, but it allows for a more deep level of expression beyond just text.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, it is fun.
That's true.
Indeed. All right. So I didn't use a gift that time. Go and can you put? I'm going to refresh so I can answer your question, and then refresh because I responded to your question.
I wish it would auto refresh. I almost talked about Bruno.
All right, and this reply that I just replied to, look at that one because this is the other thing that it gives you an opportunity to do.
Can you display the images using 3 different strategies?
So having a situation in which you can now, because we're having a discussion in real time, things that perhaps um, ideas. You can pass through ideas here. You can go and start to have this conversation deep dive where, again, I can say, yo, do you have TikTok? Could you make a song? Could you turn it into a video? Could you make it a GIF? Is it possible to make a haiku or GIF haiku? Absolutely. You can take an image and make the haiku, the words come in, in a loop or the image loop or whatever it is. Um, there's tons of ways to do this, but sometimes some students are going to be like, oh my goodness, I can go crazy, I have all these ideas and stuff, and some students are going to be like a little bit more timid or maybe not familiar with other ways to do things. This is another reason why you give them the vanilla version first. When you give them the vanilla version, I always give you the vanilla version first in my class. You see what they do, and then I show you how to make the triple chocolate cake with the fondant on it. If you want to follow that path, great. If you don't, you have the vanilla version there to kind of keep you nice and safe. It's the video game concept, right? When you start playing a video game, it gives you, are you a casual gamer? If you're a casual gamer, you don't want to die a whole bunch of times. You just want to, you're more interested in the story. Great. If you're somebody who's a hardcore gamer, you have no problems doing the Elden Ring thing and making it so difficult that you die every 5 seconds. That excites you. That's cool. That's a challenge. There's nothing. Playing the game is playing the game. Webbs is like you're gonna say something.
Also depends on where your mental state is at. I feel like we treat people like they are always in the same mental state all the time.
Yeah.
And like if I'm in a place where I am just having a bad day and I do not have the energy to give to the triple chocolate mocha version, then fine. I'm just going to do the vanilla version just so that I can meet standard. There may be another day where, or another assignment even where like, oh my gosh, this really inspires me. Like it was funny because we were talking about doing this and you had asked me to go take pictures. And so I went to the park to just go for a walk. And I found myself like, oh, I could take a picture of this and I could take a picture of this and I could, and next thing I knew, I had accrued like 30 pictures, because it just like it sparked something in me that like once I started, oh, I could take it from this angle. And I had a cool one of a tree where I laid like at the base of the tree and took it from the bottom up. And then
Mm.
it suddenly became this challenge of like, okay, how many different angles can I do? What if I did like super close up or far away? I tried to get a picture of this beetle, then it attacked me, and I remembered why I don't like nature. um but I digress. It all depends, like, it shifts things. I keep saying, I've been saying a lot lately, like, time expires everything, including thoughts and feelings and emotions, and, like, over a certain amount of time or at different times during the day or week or month or year or season, we feel different ways depending on what's happening in our lives or what the demands are on us or whatever, if we've had lunch yet. So I think thinking about that, even though a kid may not find one particular assignment interesting, and this may be something worth conveying to your class as well, they may find the next assignment or project or whatever interesting. And it's okay to do the vanilla version. Like, that's totally fine. If that's where your skills and abilities and mental state are, then do that. That's totally acceptable.
But also not being afraid to have a sous chef, right? Like, why is every I don't have the mental space right now, but I know Webs can do X, Y, and Z. Look, I'm gonna do this. Can you add some sprinkles on top of this thing and like whatever? I'll tell Mr. Lang that you add the sprinkles. I don't really get, but I did the bulk of the work. I just want you to make it. Or I may not have the mental bandwidth. I may have the talent and skills. You may have a particular set of skills that I want to utilize in my project in order to bring my vision to life. I have it up here, but I just can't make it tangible. And so also encouraging students
I
to do that. Yeah. Go ahead, Webs.
I did that a couple days ago. So I saw this lady on TikTok, and I think I'm getting a delay. They saw this lady on TikTok who was making like custom eyeshadow palettes based on or like drawings of eyeshadow palettes based on different images. And I
Mm.
was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I bet I could figure out how to do that." And I loved the idea and I figured out how to do it, but I wanted glittery. Like, I wanted to be able to add glitter shades to my like fake drawn eyeshadow palettes. So I found someone who had already designed a glitter brush set for Procreate.
Mm.
And I just bought the brush set for like $8 or something, right? Like, that's how much you'd spend on an actual set of brushes or one single brush. So I purchased the glitter brushes so that I could just do the glitter on my eyeshadow palettes. And like, could I have sat there and designed all those brushes from scratch? Probably. But like, I had them do the sprinkles for me so that I could just do the thing that I envisioned in my head.
Bada bing. And that is how the world actually works, my friends. Not like classrooms. Like it's not a what can webs do by themselves. And I have now adapted, and I think I'm going to envision. I think that the three steps of that every student, every the three things inside classrooms I think that we need to be actually assessed on and we need to reflect on, right? What could Webbs do by Webbs itself? All right, that's kind of like basic. Can Webbs walk up this corner? Can she snap her fingers? Can she do break dance? All right, bet. And there's no it's not an assessment. It's just you reflecting on these are the things I can do without anybody's help. What can Webbs do with a tool? Can Webbs use a computer in order to design software that does X? Can Webbs do this? Does Webbs know how to use an iPhone? Can Webbs drive a car? And then finally, what can Webbs do with other people? So, can Webbs design an entire website that's fully functional XYZ if given all these other people or whatever? Absolutely. Can Webbs write a novel if she had contributions from an illustrator and absolutely. Now, suddenly we have this situation where we are reflecting and we are respecting the fact that there are things you can do by yourself, there are things you can do with an implement, there's things you can do with other people. And none of this is you are a bad person. It's just these are the skills I have. And now I can go to Corporation X or start my own business or whatever with full knowledge of these are the things that I'm very good at and the things that I'm able to accomplish rather than a report card that is so so dependent on geography, who your teacher was or wasn't, who your family was or wasn't, how much money you have, what neighborhood you live in. All these things are so not good. All right, we got
Subjective.
conversation about NAEP scores. Well, I was talking to Janine about NAEP scores, and well, NAEP score, dude. Numbers without stories don't mean squat. If I didn't eat breakfast that morning I took that test, well, that's not something that's in that data. If my grandma got hit by a bus and I missed school for 3 months that school year, and I that ain't in the data. It's just a bunch of points that don't actually say anything when you think about it. Go ahead, Webbs.
So I'm on about a 5-second delay, I
I
think.
see it. Yeah.
But this reminds me of a conversation we had at the beginning of my qualitative methods class, which was like the example they gave was there's a group of SEALs that aren't doing homework. And so the quantitative data says 60% of SEALs don't do their homework. But the qualitative data goes to those SEALs and says, why aren't you doing your homework? And figures out the why of why this particular thing is happening. It's not generalizable. So if one SEAL says, I don't do my homework because I don't understand it, and another SEAL says, I don't do my homework because I don't care about it, and another SEAL says, I don't do my homework because I don't have the resources to complete it, you can't generalize that to an entire population, but it gives you some of the themes and reasons why SEALs don't do their homework. So, yeah, to your point, like quantitative data does not give an entire picture.
I mean, it's also a situation where nobody wants to do that work because there's a very particular narrative that we want to keep um, um, as popular. Again, the homework thing. Homework is stupid. If you can't sit in front of me and do it, why would I think you go home and be able to do some stuff out absent? But that's dumb, right? And you're wasting my time. And the only reason I gave homework for most of my career is because they told me I had to give homework. And the kids would do the homework, and I'm like, "That's great, Bob. I don't care nothing about that homework. I ain't grading it. I ain't looking at it. Throw that crap in the trash, and we keep it moving." All right. So yeah, I mean, that point is well taken. Super super interesting. Again, you also don't have to have a situation where what we did was not complex. There weren't a lot of moving parts. It was just here's a discussion, post stuff, and have a conversation. Which, when people say, you know what, the pandemic caused people not to talk to other people. Word, son? Where were you at, B? Discord blew up during the pandemic. Twitch was already doing well before the pandemic, blew up even more. I talk to people when I'm playing video games. Again, I have not physically been in the same place as Webbs in 2 years, and we have done this thing. I mean, it's very interesting how people will bend narratives in order to intimate that certain things are true.
Indeed.
So it is what it is, man. Uh, as this is a pre-recorded situation, so please do not. If you ask questions, we'll look at them on Facebook later on and try to get back to you or whatever. Um, yeah, this is a skill, a talent, a trait, a concept, an activity that is on our in our store. You can download the Canvas layers already and just upload them into your class. This is a really cool thing to do, like with no problems whatsoever. Kids like to go outside and take pictures. They're going to fight you to be back in the classroom once they get out and start playing the pictures. You have good problems like that. But also, a way to challenge them is what does your, and don't do it in like a creepy way. One of the things I told students all the time, do not like take pictures of your house number or your direct route home or anything like that. But what kind of things do you notice on
Mm.
your way home, right? Is there a weird tree that you're like, this tree is so awesome and the shadow hits it just right? Is there a old stop sign that you're like, this is really, if I hit it at a certain angle, that stop sign kind of says as a metaphor for like the stop the crime in the streets because the stop sign happens to be on this certain corner or whatever. Is there a crack in the road? Challenging students to go and take images of the things in their neighborhood that they find to be powerful pictures, or I think it's really, really a cool thing. Also, kids that ride the bus. What kind of things do you see as you're riding the bus? And again, don't be creepy and like shooting pictures of people's cars and stuff like that. That's weird. But like, are there landmarks? Are there shadows? Stuff like that. Go ahead, Webs.
I think too, one of the neat things that they can do with photography, especially using something like Adobe Creative Cloud Express, um, is like I think about the texture and pattern on the back of a bus seat. If you get an extreme close up of it and then import it into like Creative Cloud Express and then, make it a different color or change how the opacity so that it's kind of like see through, and it'll create this like crackly texture across of an image. And all you did was like take a picture of the back seat of a bus. Like you would never imagine that that's what that is. Or like there's tons of plants, especially living in the desert, that have really cool textures that you could take advantage of, and how you layer those and put them together and mess around with them. So yeah, there's tons of opportunity. I like when I was in my first year as an ADE and I went to institute, that was probably one of the most powerful like tools I realized I had was taking pictures. You can do so much to tell a story when you take pictures. And I never saw myself as a person who was like a photographer type or a picture taking type, but once I saw that if you look at it from different angles and perspectives and close up and far away, and like it really all you need to take pictures is a camera and that's it. Like anybody can learn how to take pictures just like anything else. It's a skill. You practice it, you get better at it.
And
I don't know. I
sometimes
think it's cool.
doing it wrong is the most fun way. Like doing it purposely, not the way you're supposed to do it.
Mhm.
Drawing, like one of my favorite things, especially with my kinder and first grade friends, is taking a picture and I want you to make that flower into a monster, and having them take their input and put teeth in the flower or give it dragon wings or whatever. Those kind of things are super cool to do. So that's all we got for today. We will see you in 2 Sundays,
Uh-oh.
live and direct. And have a great week. If you're a teacher in CCSD and you're on spring break, God bless America. Hopefully, you get recharged and you have a little bit of fun. And we'll catch you when we catch you.